Children and families are in crisis. More than ever, they're being exposed to violence, abuse and neglect. And the fallout is devastating. Welcome to Stories from Berry Street, a podcast that explores how one of Australia's largest independent children and family services organisations dedicates itself to keeping children, young people and families safe, thriving and hopeful. I'm your host, Rochelle Hunt. Join me as I talk to some extraordinary people at Berry Street and discover the realities of working in child protection and family violence spaces, the incredible work that's being done to address the rising tide of harm and violence, and what we as a community can do to help. Given that children who are coming in to Berry Street do have increasingly more and more complex needs, what does that look like in reality?
Before I answer that, I'll also say, children would say the system is complex. I'm not complex. If you think of what's been going on in society across the last 5 years, we've had a pandemic, we've got climate crisis, we've got a shortage of mental health support, we've got social media and all sorts of levels of stuff that's going on for young people. Makes that a complex place to navigate. I don't think necessarily makes them complex in themselves.
That's Tom Bowerman, Director of Innovation and Acting Executive Director of Services. His role is to look at innovative new models of care for the growing number of children and young people who simply cannot live safely at home because of violence, neglect or abuse. The biggest challenge for Tom and his team is to try and stem the flow of kids ending up in an already stretched child protection system that's struggling to meet demand. How do they do this? Well, one key way is by implementing the Teaching Family Model, or TFM. It provides those young people with a safe place to live in a house set up very much like a family home. The difference being the provision of therapeutic care and additional support needed for kids to process the effects of complex trauma. Tom will talk more about the differences it's making to changing behaviour, strengthening relationships and reuniting families, as well as what's needed to grow the model. A bit later, we'll hear firsthand how the Teaching Family Model rolls out and the impact it's having when I talk to Anthony Cupic, a Berry Street TFM practitioner. He works in one of Berry Street's Teaching Family Model homes with 4 young people in his care. But first, I begin by asking Tom Bowerman, what's really going on here? With more than 12,000 children and young people in Victoria unable to live safely at home, how can the system support such a large and growing number needing out-of-home care?
Yeah, I think it's a complex situation and there's no one reason why. And we could be talking of children from small babies right up to adolescents who are 16, 17, 18. But some of the causes or the reasons why they might not be able to live at home, it might not be safe at home. That may be due to other people's behaviour, their parents or their community or the neighbourhood that they're living in. That may be to do with their own behaviour or their own presentation or challenges. We have young people with high levels of emotional needs, mental health needs, potentially disability and other learning needs that might make it challenging to live in a family home and might make it difficult for a family to provide the level of care that's needed.
So when you say not safe, in what way? What sort of circumstances would you be talking about?
So it could be that they're neglectful type situations that people are living in where there isn't food, there's not heating, there may be family violence occurring, there may be other safety factors in terms of the children's behaviour. If they're in on a pattern of offending behaviour, they're in with a negative peer group, they're getting themselves into trouble, they're those kids that we see in the papers stealing cars and again need a space to be able to reset in a safe environment, to be able to have someone support them to try and overcome some of those challenges, ideally to be able to then go safely to live back at home.
And when you say support, what sort of support? How can the system that we've been learning so much about, how can that support such a large number? 12,000 is a lot and that number is growing.
12,000 is a lot. I mean, I think some of the things are bigger system change, so early intervention, so supporting, families earlier when their children are younger, when the problems aren't so acute. helping families, if that's around kind of financial support or navigating the system to be able to kind of make sure they're getting all the things that they're entitled to. And then at the other end of that spectrum, thinking of what we can be doing that intensively supports those young people to address the issues where they're happening and wherever possible. I think keeping children within their family, within their community safely with additional support to do so.
Can you talk to us a bit more about the out-of-home care system, how it aims to provide support and safe homes for children and young people?
So wherever possible, we're wanting to have a continuum of support or care for families that enables young people, children, infants to stay safe living at home. Where they can't, the first and I think the ideal place would be a family type environment or a kinship placement. So that might mean the child or children go and stay with a family member. So that could be a grandparent, aunt, uncle. Kinship is a broad term, so it could be a neighbour or someone that the family know really well. It doesn't have to be a blood relative. And where we would see the opportunity around innovation there is to provide better support to those kinship carers.
Like what?
Financial support, parenting support, advice as to how to manage that transition for those children who may be kind of experiencing some attachment challenges of leaving one parent and why can't I stay with my mum? I might be worried about, mum or dad's health. The more support we can provide, I think, to kinship carers, it enables children and young people to thrive in spaces that are as close as possible to their family and are going to be easier for them to go back to their family. So foster care would be where there isn't a kinship placement that perhaps is suitable or is not available, or that kinship placement may have broken down. Potentially the young person has a high level of needs, has got disability or is posing some challenges in terms of their behaviour, or they're not in school, and sometimes the young person might come into a family-style foster care placement. It might be with one or two carers. There may be one or two or more children or siblings that could be placed with a foster carer, and that's a trained carer that, in a Berry Street sense would, have an understanding of trauma and therapeutic environments that are going to be helpful for children to thrive.
Do you have enough foster carers at the moment?
There's never enough foster carers, and I think that's an ongoing challenge of, for us at Berry Street, really focusing on how do we support our carers, how do we provide good quality safe placements for the children, how do we have a team of foster care workers that are trauma-informed therapeutic that provide the best possible place for carers. But we know it's a challenge, particularly in any time where there's cost of living pressures and space pressures and people not having room in their houses. You need to have a bedroom for a young person to be able to sleep in as a basic requirement if you're going to be a foster carer, and that can be a challenge.
If kinship care and foster care aren't options for a young person, then the remaining alternative is residential care. It's a model where 3 or 4 young people live together in a house and are cared for 24/7 by staff. And as Tom explains, the demand for residential care is on the rise.
Certainly what we're seeing here across Victoria, younger children coming to our attention, and younger children with probably higher levels of need that would perhaps previously have been supported through kinship care and foster care, and those younger and younger children are being kind of presented to potentially need residential care.
What age are you talking about?
Certainly under the age of 12, and I think traditionally residential care was probably thought to be aimed at kind of 12 and above, and it certainly wouldn't be unusual for us to be getting inquiries for young people or sibling groups that are 8 years, 9 years, 10 years old.
So why are younger children being referred to Berry Street residential care?
We're seeing young people that may be 8, 9, 10 years old presenting with the same types of behaviours. Certainly 5 or 10 years ago, we would have seen of 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And so their presenting behaviours are just not able to be managed easily in foster care, where we've got volunteers in their own homes, that don't have the same wraparound support that we would have in a residential care placement within that higher level of care and support.
So why do you think 8, 9-year-olds are displaying behaviours of older children?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be exact as to why that would be, but I think we're seeing probably across society changes in terms of what young people are doing. So what maybe 14, 15-year-old young people are doing is also different and is perhaps things that we would expect of young adults, impact of social media, the at times lack of support around some of the earlier intervention or providing support around counselling, or if kids aren't in school. I think it's perhaps all coming together to create challenges for young people, and it's just coming to attention sooner than it was before. And I guess we don't know the long-term impact of things like our COVID lockdowns and particularly young people's disconnection from school. And so we know Some of the young people that were borderline of going to school didn't go back to school post the home learning. And so I think all of those things kind of cumulatively are just creating this increased challenge of how do we meet the needs of those younger children that are really presenting with quite some complex, individualised needs that take more than we can usually provide in a kinship or a foster care one-on-one placement.
And when you say more complex, in what way? So what are they displaying that means that you're seriously considering residential for a young child?
It could be a whole range of challenges. Young people that might not be in school. So straight away, the young person's not able to learn or access development opportunities, peers. They're disconnected from their family. And so they're not wanting to stay or be part of their family home, even if they're only 8, 9 years old. They feel it's safer to be outside of that or on the street or hanging out somewhere else. Increasingly young people with mental health presentations, with physical disabilities, potentially learning disabilities. The system struggles to meet their multiple needs. And we really need to think about, then how as a system we wrap around the appropriate support to be able to better meet the needs those young people are presenting with.
So how do you do that? What needs to change in order for you and for Berry Street to be able to provide that?
Yeah, so for us in our residential space, we started looking at what's best practice, what is the best approach to that, and then replicating that. And so we use a model called the Teaching Family Model, or TFM, which has got 50 years of research history. It originates in the US, but it's been disseminated across Canada, New Zealand, and now both here in Victoria and in New South Wales. We feel that gives us better support for our staff, better training, better understanding around trauma, better understanding about how to meet the needs of our kids, how to build relationships with children. What's so important is such a really strong focus for all of our work is building relationships. And so young people are coming with often difficult relationships, and we spend a lot of time with our staff and our teams really helping them to understand how to get alongside kids to build relationships, and we can then start to do some of the more, reparative work of what needs to happen for that young person. And that might be teaching some simple skills. If I'm not used to having a conversation, or if I'm not used to someone saying, no, I can't do something, or if someone says that, I fly off the handle and disappear off for 48 hours and put myself at huge risk, we've got the opportunity, once we've built that relationship, to teach some different ways of managing that. And social skills that we perhaps take for granted that children pick up through school, their peers, through their family, that these children often hadn't had the chance to experience in a successful or helpful way, to really build some foundational skills for young people to be able to be successful both in the home where we're caring for them, but also in school or in the footy team or out in the community.
And to build that trust as well. How long is a child in residential care for generally?
It will vary. I think the evidence would say if young people are in a stable placement for 9 months plus, there's time there to kind of create new habits, to create opportunities to learn different ways to manage some of those behaviours, to make different connections, to get back into school. But, we're only one part of the system, so some of that may depend on what the young person's family situation is. We might have young people at the moment where there isn't a plan to go back to family, it's not safe, or their parents no longer around. And so those young people may end up staying longer. And if that's the case, we want to make sure that we're providing that safe, stable environment for them to be successful and to help our children to be more aspirational. And so living in a safe home is that's a sort of basic that we want to achieve. But we really want kids being successful at school, to be thinking about university or work or whatever that may be.
To thrive.
To thrive.
Yeah.
And the Teaching Family Model is part of a wider association. So we have 30 plus members around the world, and we connect with those other members, which also gives us some good aspirations and learning and sharing of expertise. But there's a young person that came through a similar system or a similar residential program in the US that played in the Super Bowl 4 or 5 years ago. And I share that because it helps us to challenge our own expectations and say these kids can achieve anything if we provide the opportunity and the hope and the expectation that that's possible, as opposed to just expecting
base level.
Yeah, just good enough. We obviously want good enough, but we want to push and have those aspirations the same as we had for any of our own children.
Absolutely. Gosh, what a tough job that you have. I mean, is there parts of your job that do keep you awake at night? Because it's not a normal everyday job. I mean, these are all individual children that you're talking about.
They are. I think in the old way of doing residential care, I think that would keep me up at night more. As a leader across Berry Street, where I have confidence is that the accountability of this model gives me so much more confidence of what we're doing is the best we can possibly do. I know it means our staff are better supported, our staff are better trained, our staff are better equipped to be able to deal with challenging behaviour and challenging situations. We have a high level of accountability. We have consultants that go in and coach and provide support on a almost daily basis. So there's lots of eyes on in the homes. We create opportunities for kids to tell us, do they feel safe? Do they feel cared for? Does someone have a concern for them being successful? And are they making progress? So all of the young people across our homes tell us that. And I know from our information from last year, we excelled in the feedback from children. So that would alleviate some of the anxiety that you may have attached to kind of running such potentially high-risk
feeling
programs.
Hopeless or helpless and actually feeling like you have the confidence to turn young people's lives around. It's incredible. You've used the phrase a lot, and we hear it a lot in society now, and that is complex needs. So what does it actually mean? And given that children who are coming in to Berry Street do have increasingly more and more complex needs, what does that look like in reality?
Before I answer that, I'll also say children would say the system is complex. I'm not complex. If you think of what's been going on in society across the last 5 years, we've had a pandemic, we've got climate crisis, we've got a shortage of mental health support, we've got social media and all sorts of levels of stuff that's going on for young people, makes that a complex place to navigate. I don't think necessarily makes them complex in themselves. And I think the onus is on us as part of the system to build services and supports that meet the young people where they are and provide the supports that they need.
There are many big issues impacting young people today, even without having a life of lived trauma or neglect. So whether it be climate change or social media and bullying or the ongoing effects of the pandemic, and then you add trauma on top of that, it adds to the challenges facing the young person and Berry Street as the support provider. So with that in mind, I asked Tom if there was a young person, a service user, whose story has stuck with him over the years.
I used to live in New Zealand and I had a young person a good 2 or 3 years after we'd finished working with them phone me up out of the blue. It might have even been Christmas Day. And I would have had an on-call phone, so I answered my phone and the person was like laughing down the phone. He's like, do you know who this is? And I was like, I think I do. And my mind immediately went to, okay, what's happened? What's the problem? And he literally just phoned to say, I'm doing really well. I've got a girlfriend. We're going to have a baby. I'm like 20 years old now. Can't remember the details. But that young person would have spent time in youth justice facilities, a high level of offending, like a real trajectory of prison, a life that was very, very different. That would have been one of the most complex or challenging like family situations that I can remember working with. To call you on a
significant day as well.
Yeah.
It obviously meant something. But, it's a day of reflection.
Yeah, true. I'd never really reflected on the significance of the day, but it was a reminder for me that wherever the situation young people are in, if we're able to provide the appropriate support, the care, that relationship and the intervention of a group of people and a team that worked around the whole family, enabled a completely different opportunity and trajectory for that young boy.
That's incredible. In what other ways is Berry Street innovating in this space?
Yeah, so I think we would see it as a continuum. So the more that we can do, the more that we can bring and innovate around prevention, earlier intervention. We have a whole focus and strategy around early years and infants. So focusing on the 0 to 8s, because we know if we can do things then, it can potentially change that trajectory and avoid more involvement with systems later on. So we have some specific models of practice, and we have a really nice parenting program called Safe Care that teaches parents about 3 basic modules that, again, some parents would know, but if you've not had a good parenting experience yourself, they're helping parents to think about what's important around safety when you've got an infant or a small child, what's important in terms of health. So understanding the health needs and how you present yourself well to people like child protection workers and the child protection system, and about play. So teaching people how to play with their kids under the age of 6. So that's just one innovation that we have that originates from elsewhere, and another number of organisations across Victoria use that intervention. So trying to kind of create that continuum where we're working really intensely to keep families safely together, but we're also trying to do work to repair harm that's happened and to be able to enable young people to be able to live safely within family and community.
Community is something Tom's mentioned a few times. the role of a community when it comes to caring for children and families cannot be overstated. It really does take a village. But perhaps the village isn't aware of the scale of these issues or doesn't appreciate the impact on children of early stage trauma. I asked Tom if he believes the community at large understands what's really happening in this space.
Probably not. I mean, it's not something that, when we tend to see stories in the paper, they tend to be perhaps more negative focused, and the sensational stories of a high level of offending or something that has happened with a particular high profile incident that has caught the attention in the press. That doesn't probably reflect the general population of people that are in either residential care, kinship care or foster care. The vast majority of those would be doing well, would be in school, would be, settled in placements. But those kind of good news stories or the quiet achieving doesn't get the same kind of attention. We work hard to try and connect to the community. And so if we've got foster care programs, we would be connecting around our local community. If we've got a teaching family model home, we would be trying to link with who are the local school, what are the local sports teams, what are the local opportunities that I would do as a parent if I live in a street, so that I'm finding opportunities for my kids. And so I think we're being probably much more purposeful about what are those normal life opportunities for children and how do we find them for children that are in residential care. And so it wouldn't be unusual for me to go to one of the homes and there's no one there because one of the kids is playing football, one is doing some after-school activity, someone's seeing their family.
The old after-school activities, keeps everyone busy.
Well, the more connected to people are, they're protective factors. And so, you're more likely to connect to a positive peer group, and that can be a strong way to pull you away from some of the more negative influences that are obviously out there in society that we're trying to kind of help people, help our young people to
job
to
opportunities, you name it, changes everything.
Yeah, so young people working, again, would not be unusual. You can live in residential care, you can live in foster care, you can go and work part-time. Same as you can if you live in my house or your house. So, yeah.
Last year, the government increased their funding for therapeutic supports in residential care homes. And this will allow Berry Street to transition all of its residential care homes to TFM homes in the coming years. But are there other opportunities to ensure that as a community we can provide safe homes for children and young people into the future?
Well, I think the significant extra investment into residential care is a message that says, for some children that is going to be something that is needed. And if we're going to do that, we want to do that absolutely as well as we can. And so all of the organisations across the sector are really making sure that they're doing that in the best possible way with models that are effective, that are going to support children. That advocacy continues. I think the other thing that we would see as an opportunity, it's also a challenge, is around foster care. And we started out by asking about foster carers. There is not an unlimited supply of foster carers. And so that foster care model is perhaps a model from a different era. And so I think our opportunity there is to look at what is innovation in that space. And so we're looking at other ways that we could provide safe therapeutic placements. Does that mean we need to make that a more of a professionalised approach? And so we are exploring opportunities around an intervention called professional individualised care, where we support trained, qualified staff that might have a background in social work or youth work to be able to be remunerated appropriately, to be able to say, actually, I came into this work to make a difference for a child or for children. I'm a bit frustrated with the system because the system doesn't always allow me to do that. And this might be an opportunity to do that and see the transformational difference I can make for an individual child. Comes out of Germany, that framework. And there's colleagues in New South Wales that are doing that and have been doing that for about the last 10 years. And they are seeing successful outcomes, and they continue to grow, not because they want to grow a business, but because the need is there, and we can see it's a much better opportunity for a young person to be in a therapeutic placement with someone that they build a relationship with. It's very much built on relationship than it is to be drifting in the out-of-home care system or certainly in New South Wales. I think I saw in the media recently large numbers of children placed in hotels effectively with staff. This would be a much more positive way to meet the needs of those kids. And that's before you even get into it being more cost effective, more therapeutic. It just feels like more humane and logical of a way to be able to meet the needs of some of our most vulnerable citizens.
Watch this space. Now, let's get a closer look at what the teaching family model is and how it differs from standard residential care with TFM practitioner Anthony Cupick. As a live-in staff member at a Berry Street TFM home, Anthony literally lives and breathes the teaching family model, helping young people to shift focus, feel safe and gain stability. It's no small feat, and the passion and drive that Anthony has for the kids he works with is palpable and award-winning, as it turns out. Anthony, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be at Berry Street.
So I basically finished school and then I dove into a few different trades. I was a landscaper for about 3 years. Wasn't a massive fan of the 5 a.m. starts. Then I actually went into electrical for a little bit. After that, decided to start studying. So I went into a diploma of youth work. That took about 2 years, so I was working in between. Finished that up. Went travelling for a little bit and then applied at Berry Street and haven't really looked back since.
And how long have you been there now?
So I've been about 4.5 years now.
And a little birdie told me that last year you got Practitioner of the Year. So first things first, congratulations. But what does that mean? What did it entail?
So basically, Practitioner of the Year, it's an award. And luckily enough, I was sent to America to receive the award. So myself, Tom, and my consultant, Lynn, got flown over there, which was a really good experience. Basically, when you're a practitioner, you need to be accredited yearly. So you need to be accredited to win Practitioner of the Year. And then basically there's nominations and people have a chat and that's sort of how you end up Practitioner of the Year, I guess.
Did you expect that coming from someone that started out as a landscaper, hating it, going into youth work and then getting this award? Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, look, not really expected. I mean, the good thing about the teaching family model, you are so accountable with your work and there is so much progression. So you might not notice your progression, but it's nice to be acknowledged.
Absolutely. So as a practitioner, what does a typical day at work look like for you?
It's a very tricky question because it's chops and changes every day. But a practical day in my house, all 4 of our young people go to school. So the funniest thing is, like we always joke about it, but our biggest challenge is actually the transport, getting all 4 young people to school, which is not a common thing to hear in residential care. So in TFM model, it's really good that that's our main focus. So a lot of school runs at the start of the day, getting young people ready for appointments. There's a lot of teaching going on if a young person's maybe starts a bit later, so you're getting them ready for the day, you're preparing them. Sort of if they got an appointment, you're getting them ready for that. Myself, quite a few meetings here and there. Weekends are normally pretty chill. Get out, have some fun with the young people because, I mean, they do great the whole week. So, and then we like to have a bit of fun by the end of the week. But, yeah, it's a hard question because it does chop and change every day. But, yeah, in a normal day, it's a lot of school, a lot of teaching, and just a lot of routine for not only practitioners but for the young people.
Over the time that you're at the home with them, you must build a relationship and a rapport. What's that experience like for you?
So the thing I find funny about the teaching family model is a lot of the young people when it begins, because it is quite intense and it looks like there's quite a lot of boundaries and rules. There is a lot of pushback at the start. So you really have to work on that relationship and build that rapport. So that's from, your common interests and stuff like that. And for me, I find it just being consistent. So even if they start off, you might get told, go away a few times in a nice way to put it. But I think eventually when they realise what the program's about and you start work with them and they see that they have a big say in their life and all the decisions made and that you're supporting them with that, that's when I think that the relationships really start to build.
How long are you working with a young person for? How long are they in the home with you?
It can be quite long term. So, for instance, the longest young person who's actually exiting shortly that I've had is coming up to 3 years. So we've had a couple for 2 years, 1 year. The only time it's been short term is when the matching doesn't really work, and then other than that, it's quite long term.
Do they feel like family to you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you sort of do take on that family role. The young people have a joke, call you dad all the time, stuff like that. But the nice thing about it is like they call it home. It's not we're going back to resi or residential care. We're going home. Like, it's nice. It's really nice.
The good days are proof of the hard work that Anthony and the kids put in. But I can imagine that not every day's like that, especially after 3 years of living with people he considers family. So I asked Anthony what it's like to see the kids struggle on those really hard days.
Look, it is challenging, but then again, you also got to remember you have to sort of keep their main interests at focus rather than get too emotional yourself. So you do have to sort of take a step back sometimes, especially if you do have a good relationship with a young person. No one likes to see them sad, no one likes to see them go through a hard day. And it's also the same as if they are having a bad day and then, something gets smashed or anything like that, you got to sort of take a step back and realise the reason why. So there's always a reason to the behaviour. And yeah, so I think it's sort of just taking a step back and just seeing what they need, but it's difficult because you know them for so long. I mean, 3 years is a long time, to, especially seeing them grow up. You do take on an ownership and responsibility to keep them happy and safe. And so when it's not like that, it is challenging.
So given that you build a close relationship with them, what kinds of stories do the young people in your care tell you about their lives? Like how much do they open up?
You have your young people who are really happy to talk about and really open. And obviously that's the way that they deal with it. So they like to talk to a lot of people. Some of them are very selective with who they let in. So for instance, I have a young person at the moment, very selective. So maybe just me and another carer. The rest of them, you won't hear more than hello, goodbye. So it just chops and changes. But I mean, yeah, some of the stories are pretty full on. With the background for a lot of the young people, it's neglect and it's abandonment. So like sometimes it takes months for them to open up. Sometimes they do it on the first day. It can honestly take up to a year sometimes before they really start opening up, yeah. And then once it is, it's all out. They've got the mentality of once we're good, we're good. And then it's really easy to work with them from then on.
And it's a long time to work with someone as well. I mean, none of these fixes are quick, right?
No.
And so on top of that, you need to take the small wins. When do you start to recognise big differences? Like what are the signs where you think, wow, okay, we've turned a corner here?
Yeah, so that's a funny question because when you're there as often as I am, you do miss a lot of those little things. So sometimes it takes for an outsider to come and go, wow, like that change is so drastic and it's really impressive. And then you sort of sit back and you do look. So in TFM, like it's not like it's a high expectation, but we really want the young people to achieve because we know their potential. So we really do try and get them to maximise their potential. So sometimes you do forget about little things like, for instance, you're focusing on one thing, but that young person got up themselves, had themselves a shower, brushed their teeth and did their bed. And you sort of can sometimes skip through that. So there's so many little wins. But it's nice stuff as well. Like, for instance, we have a young person who came from another house and just hearing from the other supervisors and people in management how impressed they are when they come and see him. He's been there maybe 3-4 months. They said just in that short term, the difference is massive. So personally, it's hard to see because you're there so often. But yeah, it's nice to hear that. You know.
And the fact that it's home, you know,
yeah,
that they call it home and we all miss things at home as well. Is it what you expected? I mean, you went straight in from studying youth work into live-in care.
Yeah.
Is it what you expected it to be?
Yes and no. I was so impressed at how Nanj it was. Like, even just the structure, even though it was still early days in TFM, I was so impressed at what the model looked like and the whole structure of it. Because it actually gave purpose. It's not just like, you know, young people can actually learn cause and effect. It's actually so much life lessons that they're learning from it. So that probably wasn't what I expected. I thought it'd be a lot less structured. So it was a good surprise.
So I'm learning so much about the TFM, so the teaching family model. Mm-hmm. How is it different from general residential care?
Yeah, so tricky for me to answer because I will be probably a bit biased here because I do really enjoy the model. For me, if you're looking at it in a work point of view, it's a lot more work, but if you're here for the right reasons, it's what you should be doing. So it's a lot more accountability. There's a lot more professionalism, in my opinion.
It's so interesting to think about how young people living in the TFM homes might interact with each other. Anthony mentioned it's very much a home environment, and like siblings, they wouldn't necessarily get to choose who they live with. So how do the young people in Anthony's care get along? And what's it like seeing their relationships develop over time?
It's really nice to see. So at the moment, it's a good time to ask because it's actually been really nice lately. So like you have the older young people and they look at the younger ones sort of as a little brother. So they bicker and they fight a little bit, but they're really quite caring towards each other. It's really quite nice to see. For instance, we have a young person and in teaching family models, so you have target skills that you work towards. So you sit down with the young person and you see sort of what they want to work on for the month, and there's normally 3. His one was be a good role model because he wanted to be that good role model for the younger fella, and that's what we worked on really hard. So stuff like that, they see it straight away. Like they can bicker at each other all day, and then as soon as something happens to another one, they're sad. They're straight there. They're helping him out. They're giving him a tissue. They're giving him a hug. It's really nice. Especially
given that these young kids probably have never had a role model.
No, that's it.
Wow.
They have their fights, same as any siblings would, but I'd say they almost call each other family, to be honest. I mean, we have our house meetings twice a week, so they sit down, everyone eats dinner together, then we go through house issues or whatever, but that's all powered by the young people, so what they want to put on the agenda, they put on. We chat about it, they pick the menu together on Friday, so there's a bit of discussion. We all have takeaway together on Friday. So,
what goes on the menu?
Oh, to be honest, we had a stage where it was the same thing every single week because they just couldn't be bothered. And then so we had to get creative. We got out all the cookbooks and everything. So it was a bit of fun. So now we've got a bit of variety, but there's a takeaway once a week and then the rest, we try and mix it up a bit.
It must be a rewarding job to be a practitioner at Berry Street.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Yeah, it has its hard days, but all in all, it's definitely the good outweighs the bad all the time.
And are you confident for all of the young people in the home with you right now? Are you confident for their future?
Absolutely, big time, yeah. And this is the issue for me personally with the system. So, for instance, I have 2 young people at 16. They're trying to move them on, but if we have one more year with them, I think they're going to do really, really well. I think if it happens too quick, but sometimes that's out of our hands, which is quite frustrating because they're on the very good path, close to being able to do everything by themselves. But I think if it gets rushed, then they might struggle a little bit. But right now, all our young people have the skills and potential to do really well.
Congratulations, Anthony. Thanks so much for your time and for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I have to agree. A little more patience, a little more grace and kindness can go a long way. And by helping young people to build relationships, develop life skills and problem solve, Berry Street is offering a real, tangible opportunity for healing and growth, which should be made available to even more young people who need it. You've been listening to Stories from Berry Street, a podcast for Berry Street, produced by Sound Cartel. Find out more about how you can support Berry Street at berrystreet.org.au. Listen out for more episodes on everything from healing childhood trauma, family violence, and childhood neglect. Subscribe free wherever you listen to podcasts. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic, family or sexual violence, please contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800 737 732. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and Berry Street acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands, skies and waterways across Australia.